How you doing, guys? Big Mek Danskull here again today, back once again with another episode of Warhammer Thoughty K. And in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about soup. Oh, by the way, do you like my t-shirt? It's, a prize one. I am an award-winning YouTuber now. Or a prize-winning YouTuber at the very least. But anyway, let's get on to soup. What am I talking about? Now, a while back, I was watching a Frontline Gaming video. It's the podcast that they record, and they put the video on YouTube as well. I was watching it, and Reese from Frontline Gaming said he hated soup armies. And I was just like, what is wrong with you, man? Why do you hate soup armies? He claimed that they were unfluffy against the fluff, and they didn't make sense. And it was a long while ago now when I saw this video and him saying these sorts of things. But what I hope he meant was like in an ultra competitive sense, he doesn't like seeing them. I think that's probably what he meant, because obviously they're heavily involved in the competitive hobby scene, whereas I'm not at all. So what I like about soup armies is it gives you the ability to play multiple factions within a wider overall faction sort of feel. So I'm talking about stuff like playing Imperial Guard and Space Marines and Imperial Knights, maybe even Mechanicum thrown in there as well, against a Xenos race or against the Chaos faction or against whatever. And what Reese was saying, he seemed to say it doesn't go along with the fluff, but I've got proof that it does go along with the fluff, and that proof comes in the form of these sorts of books, the Gathering Storm books. Now, there's two here in my hands. One is the Rise of the Primarch book here, in which multiple factions within a wider faction come together to fight off a greater threat. So in this case, it's Imperial factions, Imperial and Eldar factions that come together as well to fight off a greater threat. The threat being Chaos in this regard. And again, in this one, so the Eldar factions sort of unite in this one. So you've got your Dark Eldar, you've got your Craftworld Eldar, and the Harlequins all sort of coming together and uniting under one banner of, in this case, Inari. Yeah, so the Inari are a united force of Eldar that believe that awakening the God of the Dead will then bring about the sort of rebirth of the Eldar, if you like, and they will have dominance again over the galaxy. Much in the same way that Guilliman coming back for the Imperium, that sort of united big parts of the Imperium under his banner. So he's got obviously his Ultramarines and the Space Marines as a whole, and then he's also got the Imperial Guard, the Knights, like I mentioned earlier, and the Mechanicum, and they all work together. And even in this book, the Fall of Cadia book, this was one where you really saw it coming into play for the Imperium. Chaos were all united as the Black Legion and other Chaos factions, sort of all working together to try and destroy Cadia, to open the Cicatrix Maledictum. And then Chaos would have dominion over the galaxy. But in that book as well, you saw various factions of the Imperium go to the Cadian system and to Cadia and attempt to prevent that from happening, and they were united together under one banner. And these were books where it really started to give you the rules for playing those factions together, because in 7th edition we didn't really have a good mechanic that allowed you to play these factions together. You'd have to sort of homebrew it a lot of the time. Apart from campaign books and stuff like that, you'd have to homebrew it, say, because you'd be taking, with the Allies matrix and the way it worked, you'd be taking a primary detachment, let's say a Space Marine force for argument's sake, and then you'd take allies, Imperial Guard as allies or Imperial Knights as allies, and that was pretty limited in the way that you could do it. But the good news is, in 8th edition, that's all changed, and I'll go on to that in a second, just after I've touched on how these books allowed you to do that. So towards the end of 7th edition, before 8th edition kicked in, these books were one of the few ways you could get a united Imperial faction. There was actually another book, the Agents of the Imperium book, which allowed you to do a sort of united Imperium faction, but that was a bit more limited than this, I say. Or they all have the restrictions, but this book I think did it a little bit better than the Agents of the Imperium Codex. Now this book, it has a detachment called the Castellans of the Imperium detachment. I'll just turn the page, see if there's any more. No, it's just that one, the Castellans of the Imperium. So what it is, this is like a united Imperium faction fighting to defend Cadia. And it has, same as all detachments, it has like HQs, troops, heavy support, fast attack, elites, lords of war. Now, the HQs, there's loads of options in there from various codices that existed prior to this book. So you've got Inquisitor Greyfax, she's obviously part of the Inquisition. Celestine, part of the Sisters of Battle or the Adeptus Sororitas. You can have a Terminator Captain, a Space Marine. Commissar Yarrick, Imperial Guard. And there's, Engine Seers coming from either the Adeptus Mechanicus or the Imperial Armour, IA? I can't think what that stands for. But it's Imperial Agents that'll stand for. It's got the factions in brackets afterwards, the factions as were in brackets afterwards. And then again, it's got troops, infantry platoon, battle sister squad, Tempested Scions, heavy support, Contempted Dreadnought, Basilisk Battery, all from different codices. You get the idea, I'm sure. And then it's got a Lords of War section, it's got all different knights, it's got the Imperial Guard super heavy tanks. So all those different options, and you're able to play them in one force. You had to select 2 to 4 HQ units, 4 plus troops, 0 to 6 heavy support, 0 to 6 fast attack, 0 to 6 elites, and 0 to 3 Lords of War. And it enabled you to play what I see as like the galaxy spanning battles and war on a completely different scale. Now there is an argument to be made against that though, and I'd say the argument is that when we play on a tabletop, we play with relatively small armies compared to what you read about in the fluff. So when we play, we really should be playing with just a single force against an opponent with a single force. What's to say that we aren't seeing a part of the battlefield where the forces overlap, so you do have Imperial Guard and Space Marine lines mixing to hold off a chaos threat. So for that reason, I think Soup Armies are perfectly fluffy and great for gaming as well. Because you can paint a variety of different units, a greater variety of different units, and have them all in one force under one banner. Now, putting those books to one side and talking about the current edition of 40k, 8th edition 40k, there's a different mechanic to allow you to play a soup army, and that is the keyword mechanic. Now, if you're not sure what keywords are, I'll just briefly run you through it. It's basically a small box at the bottom of a unit's profile, and it tells you various keywords relating to them as a unit, what race they're part of, what wider faction they might be part of, and with those keywords, it allows you to apply certain rules just to them as a unit, to other members of their race as well. So it could be like I'll get an example for you. So using orcs as an example, it's pretty limited with orcs at the minute because they've still only got the index and the chapter approved book with a small like 1-page update. But just as a basic example, using mob rule, a unit with this ability can use a number of models in their unit as a leadership characteristic. In addition, a unit with this ability can use a leadership characteristic of any friendly orc, and the orc is in it's in bold. Any friendly orc unit within 6 inches. So the orc is in bold, meaning that's the key word. So if they've got the orc keyword, you can use their leadership characteristic. So if you look here, it says faction keywords. I'm going to struggle to get that to focus, but basically it says faction keywords, orcs, and then clan. The clans haven't been established yet because there's no codex. But once the clans are established, there are actually some units with a clan already established, but there's no real mechanic for. There's no rules based on specific clans yet, but there will be in the future. So that enables you to use the keyword orc. Taking it back to the Imperium, I'll try and keep all my examples in the Imperium to keep it simple for you. So let's say a Space Marine the Space Marine will have a keyword Adeptus Astartes or Space Marine. I'm not entirely sure which it is, but it'll be one or the other. And they'll also have the keyword of whatever chapter they belong to. So certain characters like Lysander, for example, he may have a rule that friendly Imperial Fist models, because that's the chapter Imperial Fist, friendly Imperial Fist models may benefit from a rule that he has, whereas an Ultramarine model wouldn't. So that makes it really simple, I think, to specify which models get these benefits and which models don't. I think people in the past, in previous editions, have sort of been against the idea of soup armies because you saw abuses of it where in the fluff, let's say Space Wolves and Dark Angels for argument's sake, you might take Dark Angels Ravenwing unit along with some Thunderwolf cavalry, and there also might be a Rune Priest in that unit that gave the Ravenwing a benefit of a special rule that belonged to the Space Wolves really, and it was only ever intended for the Space Wolves. But now with the keyword mechanic, they can avoid that happening because the rule for the Rune Priest might say something along the lines of reroll failed to hit rolls for friendly Space Wolves units, keyword Space Wolves units, within a certain number of inches, or whatever the rule might be. So that, again, it makes it even more in line with the fluff, I'd say, that you can have a soup army on the battlefield. It makes it in line with the fluff, and it doesn't make it too powerful on the battlefield as well. There are exceptions to this, though, of course, like the likes of Guilliman. There'll be certain rules attached to Guilliman that all Imperials benefit from, because he's such a inspiring, majestic figure on the battlefield. So again, that fits with the fluff still, and it means, you know, there's limited characters out there that are gonna have special rules that benefit a whole soup force, but they will benefit some of the soup force more than others. So one of the things I'm looking forward to with the Orc Codex is the clans, as I touched on when I was giving the mob rule as an example. I'm looking forward to the clans, and I want to be able to play a mixed clan force, because the way orcs go to war, you have the war, and then you have loads of different clans within the war. So it's not just Goths, typically speaking. It's, you know, there might be a certain clans that are drawn to the war more than others, but it's the primal sort of war energy that draws them in. So it's all orcs that are drawn to the war. So you get mixtures of clans, all in the same battle. And I've always liked that idea of a load of Death Skulls over here, a load of Goths over there. I've forgotten all the orc clans all of a sudden. Bad Moons over on the other side, you know, all sort of fighting alongside each other, not really as a cohesive force because it's orcs, but all getting the job done, kind of, and I've always really liked that idea. That's one of the reasons I really like the idea of the super army. Let me know what you think of super armies in the comments below. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you still think they're being abused in even in the current edition with the keywords? Let me know what you think anyway, and I will see you on the battlefield.